The superintendent's episode you're about to hear was recorded in San Diego, California as part of the AASA conference. AASA brings district and school leaders from across the country together for important conversations about what they're doing in their districts, the results they're having, the results they're not having, and how we can all work together to make sure that every child can succeed in school. These conversations were heartfelt, they were interesting, they were open and candid, and I cannot thank the superintendents who are a part of it enough. From the Fort Worth ISD superintendent who told me that in her district, she's not just the superintendent, but she's also the largest employer, the largest restaurant, and the largest place of transportation. I was absolutely floored to, really have that put in front of me. And to the LAUSD superintendent who told us some real hard truths about staffing and about the different things that are happening for teachers and for school leaders across the country. We had so many leaders stop to talk with us. They're mini episodes because they had places to be and conversations to have, but these were inspiring and we're so excited to share them with you. Thanks for being here on More Than a Test. All right, today we are live from San Diego, and we are here with Jeff McCoy, the Associate Superintendent of Academics in Greenville County Public Schools. First thing in the morning, we color coordinate. We're looking great.
Yes, we did.
Thank you so much for being here. How's it going?
It's going great.
All right, I asked you earlier, but tell me something great that you've gotten out of this conference so far.
So I think my favorite thing out of the conference is always the networking, seeing everybody from around the country that you haven't seen in a little while, and just being able to catch up on the great things that's happening in their school districts, what's working, what's not.
And, at Amira, we call this like the superintendent's conference, right? So it's nice to see that a head of academics, kind of a maybe not the top job role, is here. Is that the experience in your networking, that it's a lot of people from a lot of different roles?
Yeah, I think AASA in particular tends to be a lot of senior level leadership.
Okay.
So academics, sometimes technology folks as well. But it's nice because you have superintendents from large districts, small districts. Small districts don't always have chief academic officers. So, it's great to connect with those people and learn from them and hopefully learn from us as well.
All right. So in one of those conversations, was there a story yesterday that stuck with you?
I don't know if there's a story. I think there was one of my good friends from Desert Sands, who's out here in California. Always great to catch up with her and some of the stuff that was going on. So we're good friends. We text regularly, but being able to come together and actually see each other in person, and just kind of many times just commiserate about the same things that are happening. And also some part of this, I think, work is being encouraging. Of you sometimes feel like you're alone when you're in a district and what you're doing and going through, and then you kind of realize once you get out there and start talking that you're really not. That there's other going through that.
It's funny. You started to say that about the texting, and I do think of your job as alone, and I think of a superintendent as alone.
Yes.
And then what I hear is actually you all have a community across all the different districts. When you're talking about commiserating, what are some of the things? What are the challenges that are facing us all?
So, I think some of the big challenges just around, since COVID, I guess, and really a little bit pre-COVID, just how political everything has become sometimes. And it becomes a challenge because it's, it needs to really be focused on what's best for students and kind of leave the politics out of it. So, fortunately, that seems to have been getting a little bit better again. But then again, the big thing in academics is the whole big shift from, the balanced literacy and some of the other reading programs to now moving more towards that science of reading approach. And so that's been kind of, weighing heavy on our mind for the last 3 years, really, as we kind of try to make that transition.
All right, let's dial in on both the things you just said. So the political piece, I'll tell you, I read an article this morning in the New York Times. There was a new curriculum coming out. I think it's actually in my area around like government and politics. And there's already, the curriculum hasn't even rolled out yet, argument about how to teach like the Israel-Hamas situation. I'm not going to ask you to talk about that situation, but generally, when you're looking at teaching something that is so charged and emotional, how do you reconcile that for your students, for your teachers? How do you manage that?
So we put out probably 6 years ago, I guess, we did a lot of work around how to help our teachers teach what we call controversial materials.
Okay.
Or controversial topics, if you will. Because at the end of the day, we want our students to be able to critically think,
right.
And we want them to be able to weigh both sides of an issue and make their own decision about, what side they may fall onto. And so really helping teach, I think the hardest thing is helping teachers understand that you have to be neutral.
Right.
Like, so when we're presenting these topics and it's two different sides of the story, being neutral, and you're there as a facilitator to ally the facts. And, there's great value in students being able to debate from fact and from, both sides, to be able to debate and make a case that's actually, respectful of each other's opinions. And so I think there's an art of actually teaching students, like, how do you disagree with somebody and not make it a personal attack? But how do you try to empathize? How do you listen to understand and not necessarily listen to respond?
I love the way you talk about students. They sound like they're so capable, right? So often we talk about protecting kids, and then you're like, we just need to like empower them. Oh, how did you put it? The art of being able to.
Yeah, the art of, I think, persuasion, or the art of arguing, but doing it again in a way that it's not a personal attack on somebody. And I think we've lost that. I think we've lost that as a country. I think we've lost that in several generations, that we can't disagree sometimes without personally attacking somebody.
That's really well put. And so we, as you know, children read with Amira out loud with an AI tutor. They get the support they need. They see growth. But in order for them to read out loud, there have to be stories, right? So we have a library of stories that have been vetted by teachers. And there was a story that had a little girl who was going to a school that was haunted. And her teacher had a substitute that was a witch one day. And a parent was very upset about there being a witch. And so we had to go to the district and speak with the parent and have like a conversation about this, in my opinion, harmless story, but, you know, a threat to the parent. How would you have managed that situation?
So, you know, we kind of handle that and deal with that almost every day.
Really?
Whether it be in textbooks, whether it be in, nonfiction, fiction. I think for us, it's trying to work with the parents, understand their perspective, understand their, and if it's a religious perspective in that case, something like that, kind of understanding and apologizing the best you can to the parent, but then also that helps give you some information to say, look, I'll make sure in our case, if, for example, Harry Potter used to be a big, big one for us and still is sometimes, to say, look, we'll make sure your child doesn't check that out of the library if that's something that you don't want your children to have access to. But I think to your point, in the world that we live in where everything is digital, and students have access to a plethora of books, a lot of that's just having to work with the parents as things come up, because everybody's, as you said, everybody's value system is so different. There's parents who really don't care what their kids read, which is great. And then there's parents who want to very severely limit what their children read, which is also, their right, and certainly they're able to do that. It's just trying to figure out how you do that and kind of meet the needs of everybody at the same time.
That's really hard. I can't believe every day. We dealt with it for one day. It was a lot of work.
It is a lot
I
of work,
still think, you hear how well I know this witch story,
Yes.
right? And you deal with it every day. That's incredible. Okay, so you mentioned this balanced literacy shift to science of reading. Obviously at Amira, we're pretty thrilled to see these changes.
Yes.
But for schools and for districts, it's hard.
Yes.
You say you're about 3 years in with your shift?
Yeah, about 3 years. Heavy last year, really heavy shifting.
Okay, and so tell me a little bit about that.
So I will say, when I first took over 8 years ago, when we did a listening tour sort of around what's working, what's not working, one of the things we noticed is there were some gaps in balanced literacy.
Okay.
And so we very quickly filled those gaps with some other things, particularly in the phonics and phonological awareness.
Right.
We started filling in some gaps there. So I guess you could argue we started making some changes even many years ago and we saw the gaps. The last 3 years really coming out as our state has been very proactive in moving to science of reading, has been very supportive, throwing resources at it.
Okay.
And bills. It's been great. So, it's a hard shift for teachers to make when you're used to doing one thing for 8 years or plus. And so, but overall, one of the things that's really been a great catalyst for us is the letters training. The 9 schools that initially undertook that, it's been very positive received by those teachers. They love the fact they have the knowledge now to actually diagnose and help kids learn how to read better.
Right.
So that kind of caught fire, and when we rolled it out now, the whole district starting in the summer.
Wow.
All K through 3 teachers will be undergoing it with the state support. And, for the most part, 98% of our teachers have been like, this is great. I'm excited to do this. I know I've heard great things about it. So despite the commitment, they're very excited about it.
It's like 60 hours, right?
It's 2 years. Yeah, it's 120 hours. 2
wow,
years.
2 years.
Each year.
Wow, that's incredible. And I can just imagine just how much information is there. I love that you said, the state has been pushing things out, because that's happening in almost every state now.
Yes.
We just heard New York's governor came out and said something recently. Ohio was one of the first ones. And I think teachers are still somewhat resistant. I don't even know if the word is resistant. They're just optimistically skeptical.
Yeah, that's a great term.
About anything that comes from above, right? A governor who's never taught before, what do they
Correct.
know, right? And so tell me, how is this, what I hear from you is a really positive experience with this state rollout. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So I do think it's how district leaders also take the initiatives. We don't have a lot that comes down from the top, I would say. There's more that comes from legislature.
Right.
Sometimes, which is can be frustrating, certainly. I think this Read to Succeed bills and a lot of the things that have in our state is called Read to Succeed. Some of that has been changed with the science of reading. And then the support the State Department is wrapped around that in that vision. That was easy for us to get on board with because we've seen the benefits and we've seen the growth from the science of reading. And it really was helping us move quicker in the direction we were already moving in. So I think a lot of times it's how districts sell it. Like if it's going to be, you roll out and say, well, the state's making us do this, we have to do it, or the governor said we have to do this. I don't think that always lands real well with teachers versus saying, yeah, this may be a requirement. By the way, we really endorse this. Like, this is a great thing, and here's why it's a great thing. Here's the results it's had on our students.
And does that fall under you, that messaging?
From the academic world, for the most part, yes. Ultimately, everything comes from superintendent at the end of the day. My superintendent is really great about letting me run and handle academics. And so, when I rolled out letters to our principals, that messaging was mine. I had to make that messaging positive from the academics department as the academic leads in the district and say, this is why we believe this is actually a really good thing.
That's awesome. Okay, so I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about two things that I looked up on your profile. So the first is about your district.
Yes.
So I went to your district website and I read through kind of like all of the initiatives and things like that. And there was a theme across the board. I saw something about teacher recruitment, teacher benefits, teacher training. And so I have to ask, like, is the teacher shortage really impacting your district?
So I think like every district, it is impacting our district as well. We, because of where we are, I think in Greenville's a well-known district, it's a high-performing district. We're still 2, 3, 4 points below the state as far as our, retention, right? So we're still doing very well in the state as far as recruiting teachers. And we have a lot of our own pipelines. We build our own. So we actually have a great program called Expressway to Tigertown. You may have seen in there. It's actually where we take students in high school and target them. And if they want to become a teacher, they start earning their college credit in high school towards education. And so they do 2 years in high school, they do 1 year at Greenville Tech, and as long as they keep their GPA where it needs to be, they have auto acceptance into Clemson to finish out their teaching degree at Clemson.
That is incredible. How many kids do that?
So it's a fairly new program, lasts 4 or 5 years, got a little waylaid by COVID, of course, like everything else. But we've actually signed this year the most of our students. I think we have 25 or 30 students signed up this year.
Wow.
We've got several more community tours on that.
Okay.
So I expect that we'll actually get several more. But for us, a lot of our kids are actually earning with our Graduation Plus initiative. Our goal is they don't graduate with just a diploma, but they graduate either with 6 hours of college credit or a industry certification.
What % of your kids are actually accomplishing that?
Yeah, so as of this year, 75% accomplished that.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's been that's been our superintendent's initiative. He's the one that put that in.
Right.
It's been probably 10 years going on.
Oh, goodness.
So we started in the 40s or 50s, and then last couple of years, we've really ramped that up. And we made dual credit free for all students, including the cost of books for students. So we, well over 100% the first year, increased the enrollments in dual credit classes for kids to now kind of remove that access barrier for kids.
It's interesting you bring this up. I recently had someone on the podcast and from North Carolina, superintendent, and he was saying like they dropped the barriers around getting into AP classes.
Yes.
That before there were all these like tests and hoops to jump through, and so then they found out all these kids who were capable and wanted to take the classes weren't getting in, and now they've made this shift, and it's just so great to see kids really thrive in the advanced courses.
Yeah, and I think it saves, too, from the parents' perspective, especially those students that may be in poverty who don't really maybe always feel college is an option. In high school, when they kind of get that first taste of success in a college-level class and realizing it's a college-level class.
Right.
And so if I can be successful in this, that's the best indicator, even outside of an SAT or something like that shows, I think they'll be successful. This actually is actual success. I actually passed the class with a B or an A or whatever it is.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, let me ask you about one more thing. I read this blueprint that you published in 2016 on personalized learning.
Yes.
And it was lovely and great and lots of really good ideas around how do we fill gaps for kids, give opportunities to students. But I look at this moment now with AI and the opportunity on personalized learning is just through the roof. So think about what you were saying back in 2016 and where we are now. What would you say?
So that is such a timely question. Actually, tomorrow I'm flying to Orlando after our session, and some colleagues and I are actually releasing the new blueprint on artificial intelligence.
Oh, perfect.
And it has a lot of the personalized learning and how really AI is changing personalized learning. That, like you said, that blueprint was several years ago. AI really wasn't, ChatGPT wasn't around. I really think AI is going to, for the first time, I think I can say this comfortably, can truly actually personalize learning at a level we've never seen before.
Right.
It's kind of, for a lot of teachers, it's a theory because it's hard. You can't do that for 30 kids without technology.
Right.
And now that you have AI that really can actually personalize that within minutes to children, I think we're on a, definitely in a place that where personalized learning really is going to take off.
Well, and you're somewhat of an expert, so like make that tangible for a teacher. When you say really have like what is it that AI can do that maybe a teacher couldn't do for 30 kids at the same time?
So I think, one of the things, for example, on Magic School AI, they have a text leveling piece. So when you're trying to, you want to discuss, could be a controversial, a topic. You want to discuss something in class, but you know that there's going to be some students that can't access the text because it's just too difficult. For them, or you have kids that are like, they really should be challenged a little bit more on the text that they are.
Right.
And so being able to go in that tool very quickly, take that article, take that whatever it is, throw it in there and be able to adjust it very quickly to the levels of 30 kids, 20 kids, however many kids, I think just gives those students very quickly personalized, but you're actually pushing the kids. You're actually pushing those kids that are on the advanced levels up further.
Right.
But you're giving the students who many times don't get to participate in those conversations because they just can't access the text, all of a sudden have access to it.
I think about this all the time. I used to teach junior great books, which is like some of the best literature for kids. But you'd have kids who sat and you had this whole beautiful method of like Socratic conversation for children that they were all learned. I disagree. Like they learned how, but kids sat there silently, not because they didn't have something to say and not because they couldn't follow the system, but because they couldn't read the book, right? They couldn't read this story. And so this opportunity to, upper level, or in the case of Amira, have them read possibly even the harder text.
Absolutely.
With an AI coach at the same time to help them get through those words, I think it's just remarkable. I think the dialogue in classrooms is just going to totally, and that's what teachers want to teach anyways, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think too, even like for those students that we all taught them, those students that were just like so brilliant, so smart, you're like, how do I challenge this child?
Right.
The other day I was working with a teacher and she's like, he's just so smart. I don't know how to challenge him in math. And I was like, let's just throw it in a ChatGPT and let's ask it to give us third grade problems, but let's ask it to go get advanced, more advanced problems all the way up to algebra.
Wow.
So very quickly, within 2 seconds, it spit out 25 problems that got progressively harder. So she could give that to the student. And for that child, he was motivated by that because he wanted to solve the problems. And so very motivated by that. But that would have something that normally for one child would have taken a teacher, an hour to prepare.
Right. Plus also managing all the other things in her class.
Correct.
That's totally true. Okay, so then let me just ask you since you are putting out the blueprint, what about the fear? What about all the things that people are worried about?
Yeah, so I think, we're in what I would say is we're kind of in a pivotal time in education where we've said this so many times that, we've got to change the way we do education. We did it during COVID.
Right.
We've kind of slipped right back to where we were.
Isn't it crazy how fast we all went back?
Very fast. But I believe this is one of those kind of life-changing, if you will, or education-changing events because it's not, there's really no way to prevent it from moving.
Right.
Our students are going to use AI. They're going to use AI. I used it this morning. I had to write some copy for some awards we're doing later in this year in another organization I belong to. And I mean, within 5 minutes, I was able to create that copy, edit it for my, tone and all that kind of stuff. But that would have taken me hours.
Right.
Our kids are going to use AI. And so it's educational malpractice for us to block it and say, we're not using this. This is bad. It's cheating. It's whatever it happens to be. But I believe we're practicing educational malpractice by doing that.
That's incredible. And I love that you're saying it. And I think it's super, super powerful. And I definitely used AI for writing some copy this morning too. So we could have been sitting next to each other. All right. We're running low on time. Usually we have 5 questions, but since it's a mini episode, I'm going to ask you 2 questions for people listening. So the first one is the best advice you've ever been given.
So the best advice, I think, probably is, but earlier on in my career was, I think I said it already earlier in the podcast, but that whole listen to understand versus listen to respond.
Yeah.
And really, people say that, but then really actually trying to live that is very difficult. Because we're just programmed for that. Like we're just always programmed to listen to respond to the person, not actually to understand and really provide that empathy, particularly when you're dealing with those situations like you talked about earlier, is trying to understand where a parent is coming from, sometimes very politically charged, and you may not share those same political beliefs or religious beliefs or XXX, but trying to understand their perspective and understand from where they're coming from and seeing if you can't find some common ground and finding a solution.
Yeah, that's really great. I always love the saying, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use that ratio.
Yes.
All right. Great. And 1 book you think everyone should read.
So I love John Gordon. I read a lot of John Gordon's books. So his book called Row the Boat, which is really about educational leadership and really more importantly how do you build culture. Particularly I think that's valuable for district leaders because it's hard. It's very different from a school environment. It's very different from a classroom. And so it's hard sometimes to build the right culture at the district level because you're just so busy and everybody's so scattered. So I love I've read that actually several times, but it's been one that really has helped guide how I run my teams and how I run my departments to try to, bring us together and make sure we're all working towards impacting student achievement.
That's awesome. I haven't read it, but I'll look it up. All right. Thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely.
Enjoy the rest of the conference. Good luck with the conversations. Enjoy the networking. I'm going to look for you later so that you sound like somebody who knows everybody, and then I'll have some friends too. All right.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the More Than a Test podcast. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on your favorite podcast platform. At Amira Learning, we believe every child deserves a chance to become a reader, and we're excited to be part of this conversation. See you next week, and thanks for joining.